I like art, so I thought it'd be pretty cool to compare some of the best art in Africa. What up, African world? It's your boy Home Team here. I'm back at it with another video of African history, culture, and worldview. Today I wanted to compare some of the best art in West Africa to some of the best from Egypt. I also wanted to highlight some of the differences and similarities in the phenotypes between these sculptures, largely facial features. Most of the art that you're going to see from West Africa comes from the Ife sculptures of Nigeria, and some others are going to come from the Kingdom of Benin. Now, most of us in the Western world are pretty familiar with Egyptian sculpture and art. Egyptian art is no doubt praised above all the art in Africa in our Western culture. It certainly has stood the test of time, and it even went on to influence sculpture and art in Greece and Rome. Now, while Diodorus claims that sculpture and writing were invented by the Nubians, it was the Egyptians who seemed to take this art form to the next level. Granted, Egyptian sculpture is not only the best in Africa, but it's one of the best in the world, and popular culture doesn't let us forget that. However, the discovery of Ife sculptures and Benin art completely shattered European views concerning African art, and it literally forced people to change the way they thought about West Africans in particular. The realism and the sophistication of this West African art pioneered a mini renaissance of thought concerning the humanity of these West African people. So let's start with our first sculptures. On the left, we have an Ife sculpture, and on the right, we have the first Egyptian pharaoh believed to be King Narmer. Now, right from the jump, we see some similarities. I wanted to share one of the earliest Egyptian sculptures. To begin, both of these early sculptures seem to exhibit a rounded facial structure, and they both seem to portray similar expressions and facial features, nearly identical. The clear-cut difference seems to be the positions they held in society and the scarification seen on the Ife sculpture on the left. It's interesting to note that King Narmer was possibly from the Sudan region where scarification is observed, but his sculpture doesn't really reveal this. Next, we have two young female sculptures. On the left, we have a royalty member from the Kingdom of Benin, and on the right, we have Queen Meritaten. At first glance, they seem to look pretty similar as far as facial features. One thing that stood out to me in particular with these sculptures was how the Egyptians would display hair. Benin and Ife sculpture always seem to cover up the female's hair with some sort of headdress, while the Egyptians seem to at least display a hairstyled wig. Now, both of the young females seem to have small features like the nose and the lips. However, on the left, her lips seem to protrude more and they're slightly bigger and more rounded. Now we're going to observe some differences between two male sculptures. Now on the left, we have an Ife man of Nigeria, and on the right, we have a bust of Akhenaten. One of the biggest differences seems to be the shape or the structure of the nose. I thought it was pretty interesting that the Ife man on the left didn't exhibit the stereotypical flat spread nose, but actually displayed very narrow-like features. His nostrils seem to flare up, unlike Akhenaten's, whose nose remains pretty even on the edge. One thing they share in common seems to be their full lips. If we take a really good look at their lips, they seem to be pretty much identical. Now, throughout all my observations, African lips seem to be the most consistent in the East and the West. A significant characteristic of African people seems to be the shape of their lips. Now with the next set of sculptures, we see even bigger differences. On the left, we see an Edo noblewoman from the Kingdom of Benin, and on the right, we see a New Kingdom Egyptian woman from one of the late Egyptian dynasties. We see some very obvious differences here. The Edo woman is shown as having the flat nose and full lips, while the Egyptian woman is shown as having a more narrow nose, typical of East African people. The Edo woman seems to have a protruding jaw that most West Africans have, and her lips come out more as if ready to kiss. The Egyptian woman seems to have a stronger chin region, but again, both these women seem to share the typical full lips of African people. Next, we have two royal male sculptures. On the left, we have Ife royalty, and on the right, we have Pharaoh Ramses II. Now, both of these royal men have immediate differences. Like, the lips of the Ife man is definitely more full and rounded than Ramses. But actually, what stood out most to me was the realism. It's a known fact that most Egyptian kings were completely out of shape, but most Egyptian sculptures certainly won't portray that reality. And so they sculpt them in a manner in which they would have liked to be seen. Western African sculpture, particularly the Ife, seem not to concern themselves with that and depicted their king in a very realistic way, hence the protruding stomach of the king. Perhaps the weight of the king was a sign of health and strength in Ife culture. The detail in the sculpture of the Ife king is pretty unique and shows a level of sophistication in Ife society. Now we come to two very beautiful female sculptures. Here we have two uniquely beautiful African women, one expressing Western African beauty and the other expressing Eastern African beauty. Both are very detailed and telling. On the left we have a beautiful Ife royalty woman, and on the right we have Queen Nefertiti. Nearly everything about these women are different and unique. The biggest differences between them is fat distribution throughout the face. The Ife woman seems to have more rounded features, especially in her cheek region, while Nefertiti has more sharper features, especially around the jawline. Nefertiti seems to exhibit the typical beauty of East African women from Ethiopia or Somalia, and the Ife woman seems to exhibit the beauty of a typical West African from Nigeria especially. Next we have two other royal women. On the left we have an Ife woman, and on the right we have Queen Tai, one of the top queens in Egyptian history. Immediately we observe the differences in the fat distribution and the rounded facial features of the Ife woman. But despite the differences in fat distribution in these African women, they both seem to have that narrow nose and the same protruding full lips that most Africans seem to have across the continent. For the last one, I thought I'd switch it up on you guys. On the left, this time we have an Egyptian woman, and on the right, we have an Ife woman. Consistent with Ife art, the hair of the Ife woman is covered. The Egyptian woman's face seems to be slightly rounded, but still sharp, and the Ife woman seems to have an oval-shaped, rounded face. Both very beautiful women. The Ife woman seems to share the narrow nose at the top, but the difference is her nostrils flare more outward at the end of the nose, more so than the Egyptian woman. Also, they both seem to exhibit the full African lip feature, but the Ife woman's lips seem to protrude out a little more. Well, I'm all out, guys, but I really want to hear what you guys think. What's your perspective? Did you guys see all the differences and similarities I saw? I would love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you guys are interested, I'm selling my snapback hats that incorporate African history, culture, and worldview. You guys can order your home team hats at the link below. I also take requests for future hat designs, so let me know what's up. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.